What would you do if the people who were supposed to love you the most dropped you off in a city you'd never been to, turned around and drove away laughing, "I'm Megan Miller. I'm 32 years old now, a graphic designer, a wife, a dog, mom, a business owner. But this morning my past came knocking again, loud and uninvited. My phone buzzed on the kitchen table, 29 missed calls, all from a Pennsylvania area code I hadn't seen in decades. The moment I saw it, I was 12 again, standing in Union Station, my tiny hands clenched around a wrinkled $20 bill, my parents' car disappearing into the chaos of Chicago traffic, my mother's voice echoing, "Let's see how she finds her way home." That memory has lived in me like a shadow, dormant until now. But before we go forward, I need to take you back. I grew up in Ridgeview, Pennsylvania, the kind of town where neighbors waved churches, hosted potlucks, and everyone knew your business. To outsiders, the Taylors were picture perfect. Frank and Karen Taylor, my parents, owned the town's largest hardware store and the most beloved bakery in the county. My dad's booming laugh and community donations made him a local hero. My mom's apple pies had won 3 blue ribbons in a row. And then there was Ethan, my older brother. Star quarterback, top of his class, Dad's golden boy and fishing buddy, and me, I was Jennifer back then, the quiet one. The mistake they never said out loud but showed in every glance, every silence, every insult disguised as advice. Behind the curtains of our spotless colonial home was something darker. Our family was a theater, one where I played the villain and never got to leave the stage. Dinner time was unpredictable. If the store had a slow day, Dad started drinking early. If I asked for seconds or brought home a B+, the storm rolled in. Once when I was 7, I begged for a candy bar at the grocery store. Just a Milky Way. My mom smiled sweetly, handed me the list to go find something useful, and disappeared with Dad. I stood at the customer service desk for over an hour, crying so hard my stomach hurt. When they returned, my mother said, "Maybe now you'll learn not to be so greedy." And my father. He laughed like it was a joke, said I was lucky the police weren't called. That was what they called tough love. But it wasn't love. It was humiliation as a parenting strategy. Ethan, meanwhile, lived a different reality entirely. He was praised for everything. If I got a 97%, Dad would sneer, "What happened to the other 3%? But Ethan an A+ meant steak for dinner and a toast to his brilliance. If the kitchen was a mess, I must have distracted Mom. If Dad was in a bad mood, I probably caused it by asking for help with homework. And when I cried, I was told to stop being dramatic, to toughen up, that I'd never survive in the real world. My 11th birthday should have been a clue. We baked cupcakes together the night before, just the two of us, me and Mom. I thought maybe, just maybe this one would be different. Instead of the promise party with a few friends, they said we were going to an amusement park. My heart dropped, but I didn't say anything. I figured maybe they were surprising me. They drove me to the park, handed me $20 at the gate, and said, "Have fun. We'll be back at 5. I sat near the entrance the entire day, too scared to ride anything, too embarrassed to cry where anyone could see. They returned at 7. When I asked about the cupcakes, Dad said we had to pick up your cake. There was no cake, no presents, just another lesson about independence. That night, I cried myself to sleep while Ethan played video games in the next room. No one checked on me. Art became my escape. Drawing was the one place where I felt like I had control, where the people I created were kind, and children like me didn't get left behind. But nothing prepared me for what happened the following year, the incident that would break everything I believed about family. It started with a report card. I'd worked harder than ever, straight A's in every subject. Except for one, science, an A-. When I handed it to Dad, he exploded. An A- Ethan never brought home A-. Mom added. I remember sitting in bed that night overhearing them whisper in the kitchen. "She needs a real lesson," Dad said. "Something she won't forget," Mom replied. And the next morning, they told me we were taking a family day trip to Chicago, just the 3 of us. No Ethan, just me. For a second, I believed this was their way of trying to make it up to me, that maybe they were finally trying to be parents, but I had no idea they were planning to abandon me, and the real betrayal was still ahead. The morning of the Chicago trip started off. My father whistled while making eggs. My mother packed sandwiches and hummed like she was starring in a 1950s commercial. They were too cheerful, too nice. And that's when I should have known something was wrong. But I wanted so badly to believe it was real, to believe that for once I wasn't just the punching bag or the prop in their cruel version of parenting. I held on to that sliver of hope all the way to Chicago. The drive took over 3 hours. Dad blasted classic rock while Mom played trivia games from the passenger seat. Capital of Nebraska, Lincoln. Wrong. You hesitated. Dad snorted. They laughed. I stayed quiet. The skyline came into view and I gasped. I'd never seen a city that big before. My heart thumped with excitement. Maybe this day would be different. We pulled up to Union Station just after noon. The crowds were overwhelming, suits, backpacks, families shouting over the rumble of wheels and train announcements. Dad parked nearby and led me to a massive stone pillar inside the station. "Wait here," Mom said. "We're going to find a better parking spot and grab lunch. 15 minutes. Can I come with you?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the noise. "What are you, a baby?" Dad barked. "You're 12. You'll be fine," Mom added coldly. "Stay here. Don't move." I nodded, swallowing the rising fear, and they walked away. I looked up at the station clock. 12:17 p.m. 15 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. The pillar no longer felt like safety. It felt like a punishment. My palms started sweating. My throat closed up. What if something happened to them? What if they forgot I didn't have a phone? Just $7 in my pocket. My allowance. At 1:30, panic gave way to tears. And then I saw it. Our blue Ford Taurus driving slowly past the front of the station. I ran toward the exit, waving desperately. Dad saw me. He smiled. Not the kind of smile that says, "There you are." It was smug, cruel. He waved mockingly. Mom rolled down her window and shouted, "Let's see how you find your way home." And then they were gone. I stood frozen, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some twisted scavenger hunt. They left me, alone, in a city I didn't know. With no plan, no resources, no one coming back, they really meant to leave me there. I tried to hold it together to do what I thought they wanted to prove I could be independent, but my legs were shaking. My head was spinning. I wanted to scream, to vanish, to not exist. Instead, I wandered. Union Station is massive, too big for a scared 12-year-old. I circled the same halls, watched the same strangers walk by. My voice caught in my throat every time I tried to ask for help. "Strangers will take you away if you talk too much," my mother had once said. "They send disobedient girls to special schools." So I stayed silent until someone noticed. Her name was Janet. She wore red glasses and a cardigan covered in cat hair. She crouched next to me and said gently, "Sweetheart, are you lost?" I shook my head. I wasn't supposed to be lost. I was supposed to be proving something. "Where are your parents?" she asked. I tried to lie. They went to move the car." But my voice cracked, and Janet saw right through it. I broke. Sobs poured out. "They left me," I cried. "They told me to find my way home. But home is in Pennsylvania." Janet didn't gasp or make a face. She said, "Okay, then let's figure this out together." She took me to the administrative office near the station's east wing, got me water, asked my name. "Jennifer Taylor," I whispered. 12 years old. She called her supervisor, then station security. Soon a gentle man named Marcus was kneeling in front of me with a clipboard. "You're safe now," he said. "We're going to call someone to help." I remember the expression the adults gave each other, tense, grim. They weren't treating this like a missing child. They were treating it like a crime. "This is abandonment," Marcus said. "We need to contact the police." And just like that, the illusion shattered. These weren't tough love parents. This wasn't discipline. This was abuse. Officer Teresa Ramirez arrived soon after. She sat with me in the little office as I drank hot chocolate from a paper cup and tried not to shake. She called my parents. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. I remember whispering, maybe they're just driving back. But Officer Ramirez looked at me with sad, clear eyes. She didn't believe that. And deep down, neither did I. By 4:45 p.m., I was officially a ward of the state, a scared child in a borrowed blanket abandoned by her family sitting under the buzzing fluorescent lights of a Chicago precinct. And I still hadn't cried the worst of it out, because what hurt most wasn't the abandonment. It was the realization that I'd been preparing for this my whole life and didn't even know it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in a borrowed bed wearing borrowed pajamas in the guest room of a family I'd never met, the Williams family. Diane and Robert, kind faces, warm smiles. They had a daughter, Alicia, around my age. She lent me a toothbrush and said, "Your parents will probably pick you up tomorrow." I nodded, but I didn't believe it. Not for a second. The bed was soft, the room painted a cheerful lilac, but I felt like I was floating outside my own body. This wasn't just a bad day, this was my life now, and I didn't even know if I'd ever see the inside of my house again. The next morning, I barely touched breakfast. Then Laura Donovan returned the caseworker from the Department of Children and Family Services. She sat me down in the living room and said, "We reached your parents last night." My heart stuttered. "Are they coming to get me?" I asked, already bracing for the answer. "Not yet," Laura replied gently. "They said they were trying to teach you a lesson about independence and problem solving, a lesson by abandoning a child in a different state. They hadn't planned to call anyone. They thought I'd find my way home somehow. With what my $7 and a 12-year-old's understanding of how the world works, this wasn't parenting. This was a calculated cruelty." Laura explained that there'd be a meeting with my parents the next day, that I wouldn't have to talk to them if I didn't want to, that a judge had already been notified. The system was taking this seriously, even if they still weren't. I stayed with the Williams family another 2 days. They were kind. They gave me space. Alicia showed me how to braid hair and played board games I didn't know how to focus on. But I still felt like a shadow in someone else's home. I missed something I'd never really had. Stability, safety, a family that saw me as someone to protect, not punish. Then came the meeting. It was in a gray conference room in a downtown government building. Laura was there along with 2 other adults she introduced as her supervisor and a court liaison. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and my parents walked in. They looked nothing like the people who had laughed and driven away from Union Station. Dad's face was sagged, grizzled. Mom's eyes were rimmed in red. But what shocked me most, the man behind them, a lawyer. They'd brought representation, as if this were some minor misunderstanding, as if I was the problem to manage. What followed was a surreal blur. Their attorney explained how the station incident had been a planned exercise to build life skills, how they checked back after 20 minutes and assumed I'd taken initiative to call home. They framed it as experimental parenting. Tough love, not child endangerment, not abandonment, not trauma. They said I was exaggerating, that I had money, that there were phones everywhere, that I could have called collect. I sat in silence, stunned. They weren't sorry. They were defending what they did as if it were noble. Then the court liaison turned to me. "Jennifer," she said softly, "would you like to return home with your parents today?" I looked at them. 2 people who had broken something in me that could never be fully put back together. And I found my voice. "No," I said, steady, clear. "I don't want to go back." My father's face contorted. "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. "Of course you're coming home." "That's not your decision today, Mr. Taylor," the liaison replied calmly. And just like that, for the first time ever, I was protected. After the meeting, my mother tried to speak to me again. "Jennifer, honey, you're overreacting." I cut her off. "No, I learned the lesson, Mom. You taught me what it means to abandon someone who trusts you, and I walked away. That night, I sat on the guest bed back at the Williams house, tears finally falling, slow, silent cleansing. Not from grief, but from relief, because someone finally believed me. Someone stepped in. I wasn't invisible anymore. A month later, everything changed. That's when I met Thomas and Sarah Miller. They were foster parents from just north of Chicago, a pediatric nurse and an art teacher, no children of their own. They walked into the DCFS office, warm smiles on their faces, and sat across from me with no expectations, only kindness. We believe every child deserves safety, respect, and room to grow, Sarah said. We'd be honored if you'd come stay with us, Thomas added. I'd heard promises before, but something about them felt different. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. It wasn't immediate. Healing never is. But the first night I stayed with Thomas and Sarah Miller, something shifted. There were no whispered threats, no cold silences, no lessons to teach me pain, just the soft clink of dishes being washed, the scent of peppermint tea, a quiet knock on my door and Sarah's voice. Would you like to help me with the muffins in the morning? They didn't treat me like a burden or a problem to solve. They treated me like a child who had been through too much, because I had. I remember standing in their kitchen that first weekend, still in oversized clothes arms, wrapped around myself like armor. Thomas offered me a sketch pad and said, Sarah told me you love to draw. You're welcome to use the sunroom whenever you want. The paper was blank, untouched, pristine. It terrified me. But that afternoon, I sat at the little sunroom desk, the one surrounded by hanging plants and golden light, and I began to draw again. Not the shadowy monsters or locked doors I used to sketch. This time I drew light. Hands holding other hands. A girl standing on a hill. A house with open windows. I didn't realize it then. But that was the day I started becoming Megan. 2 weeks later, the caseworker asked if I'd like to be called something else during the transition into foster care. I hesitated. Then I said it. Megan. I want to be Megan. I left Jennifer behind. That name carried too much pain, too much shame, too many unanswered cries. Megan felt like a new chapter, and Sarah and Thomas embraced it without question. They were the first adults who never tried to mold me into what they wanted. They simply listened. If I didn't want to go to school that week, we talked about why. If I had a nightmare, Sarah would sit with me in the dark and remind me, you're safe now. You're not alone. Middle school was still hard. Kids asked where my real parents were. Teachers didn't always know what to do with a foster kid who froze every time someone raised their voice. But the Millers were always there. Sarah volunteered for every art show, even when my work wasn't displayed. Thomas sat through the entire middle school orchestra concert, even though I quit flute after a month. They kept showing up, over and over. And over time, I stopped waiting for them to disappear. Because they didn't. My first Christmas with them, I didn't know how to act. I expected fake cheer or uncomfortable silence. But what I got was matching pajamas, homemade cinnamon rolls, and a framed version of one of my drawings. It was hanging above the fireplace when I came downstairs. We're proud of you, Thomas said. Not just for your art, for how brave you've been. No one had ever said that to me before. Not brave, not proud, not we. I cried so hard I couldn't open my stocking. High school brought new challenges, but also opportunities. Sarah encouraged me to apply to a magnet art school. I got in. Thomas helped me build a portfolio, drove me to weekend workshops, even made a light box out of an old storage bin when I said I wanted to learn animation. At 16, I was officially adopted. Megan Elizabeth Miller. I signed the paperwork with trembling fingers and a smile that wouldn't stop spreading. The judge asked if I had anything to say. I looked at Sarah, at Thomas, and I said, thank you for making me feel like I matter. That night, we had spaghetti and cheesecake and stayed up watching old Disney movies. I fell asleep on the couch, my head resting on Sarah's shoulder, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt at home, not just physically, but in my soul. The years passed. I graduated with honors from high school, then college full scholarship to study digital art and storytelling. I launched a design studio out of Sarah's converted garage. I called it Sunroom Studio in honor of the space where I found myself again. Now I run my own team. I design for nonprofits, schools, children's books. Every piece is a love letter to the little girl who sat alone in Union Station and still believed deep down that someone might come back for her. But they never did. Not Frank, not Karen, not Ethan, until last week. A letter arrived at my studio. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single line. Please call. Your brother is getting married. He wants you there. I stared at it for a long time. The words didn't move me, but the old scar they reopened did, because I hadn't heard from them in 20 years. And then the phone calls started. Blocked numbers, Pennsylvania area codes, one after another. I never answered until today, when I saw a voicemail transcript that made my heart still. Please, it's Mom. We're sorry. Please talk to us before Saturday. Saturday, the wedding. A day they expected me to show up smiling, grateful, forgiving. But they had no idea. I wasn't the scared little girl anymore. I was Megan Elizabeth Miller, and I had a plan. Saturday came faster than I expected. I hadn't responded to the voicemail. I hadn't called back. But curiosity is a strange thing. It seeps in like mist under a door. I wasn't going for them. Not for Frank, not for Karen, and certainly not for Ethan. I was going for her, the girl they left behind, the one I had to become a stranger to just to survive, the one they thought was erased. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about closure, and maybe, just maybe, justice. I didn't RSVP. I didn't send a text. I simply showed up, wearing a tailored navy blue suit that whispered power with every movement, my hair pulled back, no jewelry, no apology in my presence. The venue was a country estate in central Pennsylvania, classic, curated, expensive. Ivory roses, champagne linens, a quartet playing Vivaldi, a photographer bustling around guests, and then me, walking alone through the arched gate as heads turned. It took less than 5 minutes before someone recognized me. Jennifer, I turned. A woman with glossy curls and surprise, frozen on her face. Oh my God. I thought no one knew if are you really here? I gave a small smile. It's Megan now. She blinked. I'm sorry, Megan. Megan Miller. The name hung there between us like a truth that didn't care to be questioned. And then I stepped past her, toward the courtyard where they were setting up for cocktail hour. Ethan was by the fountain sipping whiskey in a crisp tuxedo, laughing too loudly. I stopped 10 feet away. He didn't see me at first. Then he turned and froze. I saw it in real time, recognition, shock, and then fear. Not because I looked threatening, but because he knew. He knew what they did. And he knew. I remembered everything. He walked toward me, slowly guarded. Jennifer. I didn't flinch. No, Megan. He licked his lips. Wow, I didn't think you'd come. You didn't invite me, I said evenly. He gave a hollow laugh. Well, we weren't sure you'd even get the message. Mom said I raised a hand. Don't talk about her like she's innocent in any of this. He glanced around clearly, hoping no one could overhear. Can we talk somewhere private? I smiled, sweet and sharp. You mean like a side exit at a train station? His face paled, and I walked away. Inside the main hall, Karen stood by the floral arch, adjusting the decorations. Frank stood with a group of groomsmen, posture tense. When they saw me, it was like watching dominoes fall in reverse. Shock, panic, then pretense. Karen approached, a practiced smile on her face. Jennifer, oh my God, you look amazing. I tilted my head. It's Megan. Of course. Megan. We didn't know if you got the invite. Ethan wanted you here. You never thought I'd come, I said. You assumed I'd still be hiding, still broken. Her smile faltered. Frank joined her, his voice stiff. This isn't the time or place for drama. If you're here to cause a scene, I cut him off, voice like glass, I'm here to watch. That's all. But that wasn't entirely true, because what they didn't know was that I wasn't alone. Seated among the other guests was Thomas, in a sharp gray suit, sipping sparkling water, looking every bit like the distinguished father of the bride, and Sarah, serene, radiant, watching me like I was the sun itself. They had insisted on coming. "We won't let you walk into that alone," Sarah had said. "We've seen you through every chapter. We'll witness this one too." And so they were there, the family I chose, watching as I stood face to face with the people who once tossed me aside like trash. But the best part, the gift box. A simple cream-colored box tied with navy blue ribbon. Inside, a printed transcript, 12 pages long, time-stamped screenshots, emails, a notarized statement, the evidence, everything they did the night at Union Station, the messages they sent afterward, the school records showing neglect, the report from DCFS. Even Frank's own email telling his brother we needed to teach her to toughen up better. She learns now than when we're gone. I placed the box on the wedding gift table with a small envelope labeled, "For the groom," from the one you forgot. The reception began like any other. Sparkling wine, camera flashes, laughter tinged with too much effort. I sat at a table near the back, far from the bridal party, but with a perfect view of the head table. Sarah and Thomas flanked me quietly. They didn't speak much, but their presence grounded me like roots. Ethan made his rounds, trying to act composed. But every so often his eyes darted toward me, like I was a ticking bomb no one knew how to disarm. And then someone brought out the gifts. It started innocently enough. One of Ethan's groomsmen placed the cream box in front of him, chuckling, "Classy wrap, no card." Ethan turned pale the second he saw the handwriting on the envelope. He opened it. Inside was a single sentence. "You left me with nothing but silence, so here's mine, made of truth." His hands began to shake. He opened the box and read the first page. From my seat across the room, I watched him. Each page was a gut punch. Photos of me alone at the station, screenshots of emails from his college account, where he told friends I was just a cousin, not really part of the family, Karen's signature on withdrawal forms from my therapy fund account, Frank's written acknowledgement that they had left me intentionally believing they were cutting off dead weight. I had copies of everything, official, verifiable, years of documentation, not for vengeance, for truth. And Ethan had just opened the door. I didn't make a scene, but the whispers started almost immediately. People saw his expression change, the color drain from his face. His fiancée Olivia, whom I had never met before, leaned over and asked what was wrong. Ethan muttered something, tried to hide the folder, but Olivia stood up and picked it up herself. Read the top page. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the papers. She simply walked over to the microphone and said, "Everyone, I need your attention for a moment." The room quieted. Glasses lowered. Forks paused mid-air. Olivia's voice was calm but shaking slightly. "I'm not sure how many of you know this, but Ethan has a sister. Her name is Megan. She's here." A few murmurs. Heads turned. "I just read something she gave him, something that shows what she's lived through. And I think, if we're going to celebrate Ethan as a man of honor, we should know the full picture." Then she held up the folder. What I just read broke me. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. Because no child should have been treated the way Megan was. Karen was on her feet, moving quickly toward Olivia. "Olivia, that's enough. This is our son's wedding, don't you?" But Olivia didn't flinch. She held the papers in one hand and said clearly, "You abandoned her, lied about her, profited off her silence." Frank stood, booming voice echoing, "You don't understand the context. Those documents are real," Olivia snapped. "And if anyone wants to verify them, I already emailed a copy to myself." The guests sat stunned. Phones started coming out. It was happening. The unraveling. I remained in my seat, not smug, not smiling, just still. I didn't need to say anything. My truth was walking itself across the room, page by page. Karen tried to gather the documents, but Olivia wouldn't let her. Ethan sat head in his hands, not even pretending anymore, and Sarah reached over and gently squeezed my hand. Later in the quiet lull, after most of the guests had scattered, Olivia approached me. She knelt beside my chair and said softly, "I didn't know. I wish I had. I'm sorry." And I nodded. "You didn't owe me anything, but thank you for seeing it." She looked over at Ethan, still seated alone, eyes blank. "I'm not sure I can marry someone who could live with himself after that." I didn't respond. That was her decision, her pain to unpack. But in that moment, I saw a kind of justice I never expected someone choosing truth over family loyalty.